The church was packed, and the atmosphere was electric. Guests whispered excitedly as Emma stood nervously at the altar, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan Graves, the man she was about to marry, stood beside her, a picture of confidence and composure. His dark eyes locked with hers, a reassuring smile on his lips. The moment felt like a dream. The preacher spoke, his voice barely reaching Emma's ears as she stared at the man who had once been her savior, her partner, and now her fiancé. This wedding, the culmination of their whirlwind romance, should have been the happiest day of her life. Instead, a gnawing feeling of unease had settled deep in her gut. The crowd fell silent, the moment of truth had arrived. Ethan took her hand in his grip warm but firm. The preacher asked the age-old question, "Do you, Ethan, take Emma to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Ethan smiled, ready to speak his vows, but before he could, Emma did something completely unexpected. With a sharp movement, she reached up to the veil that covered her face and yanked it off, revealing her determined gaze. The room went deathly quiet. Emma stood there, holding a small device in her hand. She clicked it, and the giant screen behind them flickered to life. The guests gasped as they saw the video start to play. It wasn't just any video. It was a grainy recording, but the images were clear enough. Ethan Graves, the beloved billionaire businessman, was seen in a private meeting with a group of shady figures. They were discussing a deal that involved illegal business practices and, worse, personal betrayal. Emma's heart raced as the video played on, her hands trembling as she held the device. The video exposed Ethan's darkest secret, his involvement in a network of corruption that spanned continents. She had discovered it all: the bribes, the illegal contracts, the manipulation of markets. This wasn't just about business, this was about lives ruined for profit. And the man she was about to marry was at the center of it all. The room was in an uproar. Guests stood up, some in shock, others murmuring in disbelief. The gasps echoed off the church walls. Ethan's face turned pale, his eyes widening as the reality of what was happening sank in. His grip on Emma's hand tightened, but Emma wrenched her hand away, her heart sinking. "You're a liar," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "All this time, you've been lying to me, to everyone." Ethan stood frozen, a man caught in a web of his own making. He had always been calculated, always in control, but now the control slipped from his fingers like sand through an open hand. "Emma," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I can explain." "Explain?" She cut him off, her voice rising in anger. "You've been deceiving everyone. You used me to cover up your lies. You're nothing but a fraud." The crowd remained silent, watching in stunned silence as the confrontation unfolded. Emma felt like she was on the edge of a cliff, teetering between the man she thought she loved and the man who had just shattered everything she believed in. Her hands clenched into fists as she glared at him, her mind racing. The wedding that should have marked the start of their forever was now nothing more than a public spectacle of his betrayal. But she was done. Done with the lies, done with the deceit. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Ethan asked, his tone darkening. "You have no idea what you've just done." Security guards began to move toward Emma, but she didn't flinch. She held her ground, refusing to let him intimidate her. The moment was hers, and she wasn't about to let him steal it. Without saying another word, she turned and walked away from the altar, her heart breaking with each step. The sound of murmurs grew louder behind her, but she ignored it. The moment she stepped out of the church, she felt free, yet in some strange way, it also felt like her world had just collapsed. Outside, she was met with flashing cameras, reporters shouting questions, and the cold reality of what she had just done. She de-exposed him to the world, but at what cost? Her heart ached, the pain almost unbearable. Ethan had been everything she thought she wanted. But now, as the weight of the truth crashed down on her, she realized how much she had been blinded by his charm, by his perfect facade. Ethan was no longer the man she loved. He was a stranger, a man whose secrets were now in the open for everyone to see. But what about her? What was left for her now? Before she could process anything, a voice called her name. She turned to see Ethan striding toward her, his face grim, his features set in determination. "You think this is over, Emma?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." As he reached her, she took a step back, feeling a surge of fear. She didn't know what he meant, but she knew one thing for sure: this was far from over. "You'll regret this," he warned her. And just like that, the man she had once trusted, the man she had loved, became the biggest threat she had ever faced. The story was only beginning. It had been a week since Emma's world had come crashing down at the altar. But now, as she sat in her quiet apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Ethan Graves, the charming, successful billionaire, was more than just a man hiding his darkest secret. There was a story here, a story that no one knew, and Emma was determined to uncover it. The wedding had been the culmination of everything she thought she had wanted. Ethan, with his wealth and power, had made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. But now, sitting in the dim light of her living room, Emma realized how blind she had been. She had ignored the signs, the little cracks in the perfect facade that had once seemed so reassuring. It started innocently enough, a casual meeting at a charity event, followed by late-night phone calls, messages, and dinners. Ethan had swept her off her feet, his kindness, his intelligence, his charm. But in hindsight, Emma could see the moments when the pieces didn't add up. The way he would disappear for days on end, the coldness in his voice when certain topics came up, the unexplained trips he'd take. It wasn't until a mysterious tip had arrived, in the form of an anonymous email, that Emma's suspicions had deepened. The message was simple but chilling. Ethan Graves is not who he appears to be. Dig deeper. The truth is out there. There had been no signature, just the cryptic warning and a link to a secure file. Curiosity had always been Emma's strength, especially in her line of work as a journalist. She had spent years digging into stories, uncovering truths, and getting to the bottom of mysteries. But this felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan's secrets were dangerous, not just for her, but for everyone around him. She had wasted no time. The first thing she did was trace the link. It led her to a series of encrypted documents detailing financial transactions, offshore accounts, and suspicious deals that Ethan had been involved in. None of it made sense at first. Why would a man like Ethan, who had it all, be involved in anything illegal? But the more she dug, the clearer the picture became. There was corruption, manipulation, and a deep network of shady dealings that ran far beyond just Ethan. One particular document caught her eye. It detailed a series of high-profile meetings involving a group of unknown individuals, and at the center of it all was Ethan Graves. The file indicated that Ethan had been involved in an underground auction where rare and priceless artifacts were traded, but not just any artifacts. These were items tied to a much darker past, items with a history of violence, theft, and death. Emma had felt a shiver run down her spine. This was no longer just about business, this was about something much more sinister. She knew she had to get to the bottom of it, but she couldn't do it alone. She enlisted the help of her old friend, Alex, a hacker with a reputation for digging into places no one else dared to go. Over the next few days, they worked together, uncovering more and more incriminating evidence. The auction was just one piece of the puzzle, but it was a significant one. Artifacts weren't just being traded for profit, they were being used to cover up something far worse. The deeper they went, the more Emma began to realize how carefully Ethan had orchestrated his public image. On the surface, he was the perfect businessman, philanthropic, charming, and beloved by all. But beneath that, he was a master manipulator, hiding his darkest secrets behind a mask of charm and wealth. Emma had seen men like him before, men who thought they were untouchable, above the law. But Ethan, he was something else. He was calculating, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it took to protect himself. The more Emma learned, the more she realized how deep the rabbit hole went. Ethan had ties to dangerous people, people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden, and if Emma wasn't careful, she might become their next target. One night, after hours of poring over the documents, Emma received a phone call. It was from an unknown number, but she didn't hesitate to answer. Emma, the voice on the other end was familiar, but it was Alex's. "You've been looking into things you shouldn't, you don't understand what you're getting yourself into." It was Ethan's voice. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this, not yet. "Ethan," she replied, trying to keep her composure. "I know what you've been hiding. I know about the auction, the deals, the people you've been working with. It's all there, Ethan. I'm not backing down." There was a long pause on the other end. For a moment, Emma thought he had hung up. But then he spoke again, his voice calm but dangerous. "You're in over your head, Emma. You have no idea what you've just stumbled into. If you keep digging, you'll regret it. You can't control this anymore. You don't understand the stakes." Her pulse raced. She had thought Ethan might be angry, but the coldness in his voice now struck her like ice. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll find out soon enough," Ethan replied before hanging up. Emma sat there in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in. She had pushed too far, and now there was no turning back. Whatever game Ethan was playing, it was much bigger than she had ever imagined. As she stared at the pile of evidence in front of her, one thought burned through her mind. Ethan Graves was hiding more than just a dark past. He was hiding something far more dangerous, and now she was in the crossfire. The phone call from Ethan had left Emma shaken, but it also ignited a spark of determination within her. She couldn't back down now. She had come too far, uncovered too much, and now there was no turning back. Ethan had threatened her, but she had seen this before. Powerful men didn't scare her. What scared her was the possibility that her pursuit of the truth might put her life in danger. She needed more evidence. She needed something undeniable, something that would finally expose Ethan for who he really was. But she also knew she had to be careful. He was dangerous, and now that she had discovered his secrets, he would stop at nothing to protect himself. Over the next few days, Emma kept her movements as discreet as possible. She didn't trust anyone, especially not Ethan. She had already reached out to her editor, trying to keep the story under wraps, but she knew that if she didn't act fast, she might never get the chance to publish it. The pressure was mounting. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how deeply entwined Ethan was with the corrupt network. His reach extended into every corner of the city, and if she wasn't careful, she could easily become a target. She spent the next few nights combing through the evidence, organizing the files, and cross-referencing the names. There were so many players in this game, so many people who would kill to keep their involvement in the dark. But Emma wasn't afraid. She knew she had the power of the truth on her side, and that truth was going to be her weapon. Then, just as she thought she was making progress, things took a darker turn. It was a Thursday evening when the first warning came. Emma had just returned from a late dinner with Alex, where they had discussed the next steps. As she stepped into her apartment and locked the door behind her, she noticed something strange. Her front door was slightly ajar. It hadn't been like that when she left. She was certain of it. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and her heart began to race. She crept inside, every muscle tense, her eyes scanning the room. Her apartment was small but cozy, and there was no sign of forced entry. It seemed untouched, but Emma knew better than to let her guard down. She moved cautiously, checking every corner, every drawer. When she reached her desk, she froze. The files she had been working on, the evidence she had gathered against Ethan, were gone. Her stomach dropped. Someone had been in here. Someone had taken the documents. It didn't take long to realize who was behind it. Ethan. He had sent someone to retrieve the files, to silence her. But what did that mean for her now? Emma was terrified, but she couldn't let fear control her. She had come too far. The truth was within her reach, and she couldn't let Ethan win. Not after everything he had done. She immediately called Alex. "I think they've found me," she said, her voice trembling. "Who? What's going on?" Alex asked, his voice urgent. "They've taken the files, Alex. Whoever is working with Ethan, they came to my apartment and took everything. I don't know what to do." There was a pause on the other end. Emma could hear Alex's breath quicken, his mind working quickly. "You need to get out of there. I'll start working on getting those files back. Meet me at the usual place and we'll figure out our next move." Emma hesitated. "But what if they're already watching me? What if I'm being followed?" "Don't worry," Alex said reassuringly. "I'll cover your tracks. Just get out of there. We'll handle this." She knew she had no choice. With a deep breath, Emma gathered what little she could carry, her phone, her laptop, and a small bag with essentials. She didn't have time to think, only to act. The last thing she needed was to be caught with evidence that could implicate her. As she stepped out of her apartment, the cool night air hit her face, and she felt a pang of fear deep in her chest. But she pushed it aside. Fear wasn't going to stop her. She made her way to the alley behind her building, where she had parked her car. The city felt different tonight, darker, more oppressive. The usual hum of the streets seemed distant, muffled. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She drove through the city streets, each turn making her feel more exposed, more vulnerable. The tension in her chest only grew as she neared the meeting point with Alex. The streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk, and Emma kept her eyes on the rearview mirror, checking for any sign of a tail. Finally, she reached the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was the one place she knew she could meet Alex without being seen. The area was deserted, save for a few parked cars and the occasional passerby. She parked in the back lot, keeping her headlights off to avoid drawing attention. As she stepped out of the car, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Alex. He was tall, with short, messy hair and an ever-present hoodie that made him blend into the darkness. He looked around cautiously before approaching her. "Did anyone follow you?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "I don't think so," Emma replied, "but I'm not sure. This whole thing feels different now." "Yeah," Alex muttered, his brow furrowing. "They're on to us, but we're not stopping here. We just need to figure out our next move." Emma nodded, her mind racing. She knew that the deeper she went, the more dangerous this would become, but she also knew she couldn't turn back now. Ethan's secrets were out, and the only way to stop him was to expose everything. And she wasn't going to let him win. The game had just begun. Emma sat across from Alex in the dimly lit warehouse, her mind swirling with possibilities. The stolen files, the cryptic phone call from Ethan, everything had escalated so quickly. She had expected Ethan to be powerful, but she had never imagined just how far his influence reached. It was clear now that she was in over her head, but retreating wasn't an option. She had come too far to back down. "Do you think he's watching us?" Emma asked, her voice tight with anxiety. She had the nagging feeling that Ethan's eyes were on her, even now tracking her every move. Alex was busy typing away on his laptop, his fingers moving swiftly over the keys. "I wouldn't be surprised," he said, not looking up. "Ethan's a mastermind when it comes to surveillance. He's likely got people watching you. We just need to stay off his radar for a while." Emma exhaled sharply, her hands clenching into fists. "This is insane, Alex. How did it all get this far? I was just trying to uncover a story. I didn't sign up for this kind of danger." "I know," Alex said softly, finally looking up at her. "But we're in this now, and we can't just give up. I've got a few leads I'm working on, but I'll need your help to move forward." She nodded, her resolve hardening. "What do you need me to do?" Alex paused, his gaze shifting toward the back of the warehouse. The air seemed heavy, thick with the tension of what was to come. "I need you to go back to his office. We'll need something bigger to take down Ethan, something irrefutable. We can't rely on what we have so far. If we can get access to his private files, we can expose him for good." Emma hesitated. The thought of stepping into Ethan's world again, after everything that had happened, filled her with dread, but she had no other choice. This was bigger than just her. It was about bringing a corrupt man to justice, someone who had likely ruined countless lives to maintain his empire. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest, "but I'm going to need some help getting in. I don't know the first thing about hacking into a high-security system." Alex's lips twitched into a smile. "I'm not asking you to hack into anything. I'll handle that. You just need to get inside and find the server room. I'll guide you through it." They made their plans. Emma would head to Ethan's downtown office under the guise of meeting him for a follow-up on their earlier discussions. The building was a fortress, with security cameras at every entrance and a team of well-trained guards. But Alex had already mapped out a way for her to slip past them. "Once you're in," Alex said, his voice serious, "you'll need to find the private server room. Ethan keeps all his sensitive data there. Once you get to the terminal, I can hack into the system and give you access to his files. But you have to be fast. If anyone sees you—" "I know," Emma interrupted, her pulse quickening. "I'll be quick and I'll be careful." "Good, but remember, if things go south, don't try to be a hero. Just get out of there. I'll make sure you have an exit route." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had been in high-pressure situations before, but this was different. She was about to break into the heart of one of the most powerful men's operations in the city, and if she failed, the consequences could be dire. "Ready?" Alex asked, his voice a little less sure now. "Ready," Emma replied, her voice firmer than she felt. The next day, Emma found herself standing in front of the glass and steel skyscraper where Ethan's company, Graves Enterprises, was headquartered. She had never been inside this building before, but she had seen it from the outside countless times. It was a monument to Ethan's success, a towering symbol of his influence. She adjusted her blazer, trying to appear confident as she entered the lobby. The security guard at the desk gave her a cursory glance before nodding and waving her through. "Good morning, Miss Clark. Mr. Graves is expecting you on the top floor. Your visitor pass is already active." "Thank you," Emma replied, her voice calm as she moved past the guard and toward the elevator. She could feel the eyes of the security personnel on her as the doors closed, and she wondered if they knew something she didn't. She tried not to let the paranoia take over. Once the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Emma stepped out into the pristine lobby of Ethan's private offices. It was as sleek and modern as she had expected: glass walls, polished marble floors, and a view that stretched across the entire city. She walked toward the receptionist, who smiled at her. "Ms. Clark," the receptionist said, standing to greet her. "Mr. Graves is in the conference room waiting for you, right this way." Emma nodded, smiling back, but inside her heart was pounding. She had to be careful, play her part, and do everything in her power not to raise suspicion. As they walked through the hall, Emma couldn't help but feel the weight of the eyes on her, as though the building itself was watching her every move. They reached the conference room where Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the skyline. He turned as she entered, his smile warm but distant. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth, too smooth. "I wasn't expecting you to drop by today, but I'm glad you did. How are you?" "I'm good," she said, her voice steady. "I wanted to talk about some follow-up details for the project we discussed last week." Ethan nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "Of course, let's discuss it." As they sat down, Emma couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She was here to gather information, to find the proof she needed to bring him down. And for the first time, she felt the full scope of the danger she was in. Emma's mind raced as she sat across from Ethan, her hands clammy despite her best efforts to appear composed. He was too calm, too collected. It was as if he knew everything. Her heart thudded in her chest, and she had to force herself to focus on the conversation at hand. The stakes had never been higher. "So, what's next on the agenda?" she asked, trying to sound casual as she took out her notebook. Her fingers were cold as they hovered over the page, the words she wanted to write never seeming to come. Instead, she watched Ethan closely, searching for any sign of weakness, any hint of the man behind the facade. Ethan's gaze shifted, and his lips curled into a half-smile. "Well, Emma, I thought we could discuss the future of Graves Enterprises," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I think you might find some of it interesting." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Was he on to her? Was he setting a trap? "I'd love to hear more," she said, trying to mask the unease that threatened to bubble up. "You know I'm all about the details." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on the table in front of him. He looked every bit the powerful CEO that he was, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a game she didn't understand. His calm demeanor seemed almost too perfect. It was like he was waiting for her to make a move, to slip up. "I've been thinking about our conversation last week," he continued, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You mentioned wanting to dig deeper into the company's operations, and I thought, well, why not show you what goes on behind closed doors?" Emma forced herself to keep her expression neutral, even though her mind was already working overtime. This was her chance, the opportunity she had been waiting for, but she had to be careful. One wrong move and it would all fall apart. "I appreciate that," she said, her voice calm, "but I'm sure there's a lot of sensitive information you don't want just anyone to have access to. I'd hate to overstep any boundaries." Ethan's smile widened. "You're very cautious. I like that." He stood up and walked toward the window, his back to her. "But you're more than just anyone, Emma. You've been with us for a while now, and I think it's time you saw the full picture." A chill ran down Emma's spine. She had expected this in some way, but hearing him say it so casually made it all the more real. This was no longer just a story she was chasing. This was personal. "Of course," she said, standing up and following him toward the door. "I'm ready." Ethan led her down the hallway to a secured elevator, his movements confident, assured. The elevator ride was silent, the hum of the machinery the only sound between them. When the doors opened, Emma found herself in a sterile, high-tech floor she had never seen before. It was a vast space, with rows of desks and large screens flashing with numbers, graphs, and charts. This was where the real business happened, the kind of business that Ethan never showed anyone. "This is the heart of Graves Enterprises," Ethan said, his voice filled with pride. "Where we make the big decisions." Emma took in her surroundings, her mind alert as she scanned the room. There were several employees working at their desks, but the atmosphere was tense, like everyone knew they were walking on eggshells. She had no doubt that Ethan's reach extended far beyond this building. They walked past the rows of desks, Ethan leading her down another hallway, more secure, more guarded. Emma could feel her pulse quicken as they approached a door with a keypad lock. Ethan entered a code, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was dark, illuminated only by the glow of several computer screens. A large, steel table sat in the center, surrounded by chairs. Emma's gaze fell on a set of thick files stacked neatly on one of the tables. This was it, the heart of Ethan's operation. "These are the private documents I was telling you about," Ethan said, his voice colder now. "The files that shape everything." Emma stepped forward, her fingers itching to reach for the files, to see the evidence that could bring everything crashing down. But she stopped herself, remembering Alex's words, "Don't rush." She had to play it smart. She couldn't let Ethan know she was on to him. Instead, she nodded and glanced around the room. "So, what do you want to show me?" Ethan smiled, the same predatory smile that had unsettled her during their earlier meetings. "I thought you might want to see something a little more personal." He reached over to one of the screens and tapped a few keys. A video began to play on the monitor. It was grainy at first, but the footage soon became clearer. Emma's stomach dropped as she recognized the figures on the screen. She could see herself walking into a restaurant, meeting with someone, speaking to an unfamiliar man. The footage was taken from a distance, hidden in shadows, but there was no mistaking it. Ethan had been watching her. "What is this?" she asked, her voice strained. Ethan turned to her, his eyes dark and calculating. "I have to admit I'm impressed. You've been very thorough in your investigation, Emma, but now that you're here, I think it's time we had an honest conversation." Her heart raced. Ethan was playing a game, and she was caught in the middle of it. She didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was certain. He was no longer the charming CEO she had once admired. This man was a monster, and she had to find a way to escape before it was too late. The video continued to play on the screen, each frame more chilling than the last. Emma's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. The footage was undeniable. She had been under surveillance, and Ethan had known about it for far longer than she'd realized. "Why are you showing me this?" Emma managed to ask, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts to maintain control. Her fingers clenched into fists at her sides, nails digging into the palms of her hands. Ethan turned from the screen, his expression unreadable. He took a step closer to her, his presence imposing. "Because, Emma, I want you to understand just how much I know. I've watched every move you've made, every decision you've taken. You're not as careful as you think." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. She couldn't let him see her fear. "What do you want from me?" Ethan's lips twitched into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "I want you to stop playing this game. It's over. I've been more than patient with you, but now it's time to stop pretending." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't breathe. Every instinct in her screamed at her to run, to get out of that room and never look back. But she couldn't leave empty-handed. She had to get the files. She had to expose him. "You've been investigating me for a long time," Ethan continued, his voice smooth and unbothered. "And I know why. You want to bring me down, but you've underestimated me, Emma. You've underestimated how far I'll go to protect what's mine." Emma's eyes narrowed, her mind turning over the possibilities. Was this a threat? Was he trying to intimidate her into backing off? She had to buy time, figure out her next move. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady despite the terror swirling inside her. "I'm not here to bring you down. I'm here for the truth." Ethan chuckled softly, the sound sending a chill down her spine. "The truth? You think you can handle the truth, Emma? You think you're ready for what's really going on behind all of this?" She didn't know how to respond. Her thoughts were a mess, each one crashing into the next, but one thing was clear: she couldn't let Ethan control the conversation. She had to take charge. "You're not going to intimidate me," Emma said firmly, her eyes locking with his. "You may have all the power and all the resources, but I'm not afraid of you, and I won't stop until I uncover the truth." Ethan's smile faded, his eyes turning cold. He took a step back, his expression hardening. "I admire your courage, Emma, but it's misplaced. You've made a mistake, and I'm not going to let you walk away from this." Before she could react, Ethan moved quickly, his hand reaching for a small drawer in the table. He pulled out a flash drive, holding it up between them. "This," he said, his voice icy, "contains everything. All the files you've been trying to find, the secrets, the lies, it's all here." Emma's stomach dropped. This was the moment she had been working toward. But as she reached for the flash drive, something in Ethan's eyes made her pause. She had no idea what was coming next, but she couldn't let him dictate her every move. "What are you going to do with that?" she asked, her voice quieter now, more cautious. Ethan's grin returned, sharp and predatory. "I think you know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to destroy you, Emma. I'm going to make sure you never get the chance to expose me." Suddenly, the door to the room burst open and two security guards stepped inside, their eyes fixed on Emma. Ethan didn't even flinch. His gaze remained locked on her, his expression unreadable. "Take her," Ethan ordered, his tone final, unyielding. The guards moved quickly, each one grabbing one of Emma's arms. She struggled, trying to break free, but their grip was like iron, holding her firmly in place. She glared at Ethan, fury burning in her chest. This wasn't over. She wouldn't let him win. "What do you think you're going to do?" she spat, her voice trembling with anger. "You're just a coward, hiding behind your money and power. You can't stop me." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he walked slowly toward the door, his eyes never leaving Emma. "You'll see, Emma," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "You'll see what happens when you make the wrong enemies." The guards dragged her out of the room, down the hall, and toward the elevator. Emma's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan, any plan, to escape. She couldn't let Ethan get away with this. She had come too far to be stopped now. When the elevator doors opened, Emma was shoved inside, and the guards followed her, blocking the exit. The ride was silent, each second stretching on for what felt like an eternity. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears, but her mind was sharp. She needed to find a way out. As the elevator descended, Emma's thoughts turned to Alex. She had to get to him. She had to warn him. She wasn't sure how she would escape, but she couldn't let Ethan's game end here. She had a chance, a slim one, but it was the only one she had. The elevator doors opened to the ground floor, and the guards began to escort her toward the exit. But as they neared the doors, Emma saw something that made her heart race. Alex was waiting for her outside, leaning casually against the wall, his eyes scanning the area. Emma's pulse quickened. She had no idea how he had gotten here, but he was her last hope. She couldn't let this chance slip away. She didn't hesitate. In one swift movement, she elbowed the nearest guard in the ribs, causing him to stumble back in pain. With all her strength, she yanked herself free from the other guard's grip and bolted toward Alex. "Run!" she shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Alex didn't need another word. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into the alleyway behind the building. The guards shouted behind them, but it was too late. Emma and Alex had already disappeared into the shadows. The night air was cool against Emma's skin as Alex pulled her through the alley, his grip firm but reassuring. Her heart raced, still pounding from the confrontation with Ethan and the chaos of her escape. They ran in silence, their footsteps echoing off the narrow walls of the alley as they made their way toward the street. Emma could hear the distant shouts of the security guards behind them, but she didn't dare look back. "Keep running, don't stop," Alex whispered urgently, his voice a low command. He was focused, his gaze never wavering from the path ahead. Emma nodded, her body moving on instinct, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. They reached the end of the alley and darted out onto the bustling street. People walked past, unaware of the danger that had just unfolded behind them. Alex kept his pace steady, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of pursuit. They had to get to safety and fast. "Where are we going?" Emma panted, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. She was exhausted, but the fear of being caught kept her feet moving. "To my place," Alex replied. "We'll lay low for a while, they won't think to look there." Emma wanted to argue, to question him more, but there wasn't time. The guards would be searching for them soon, and they couldn't afford to waste a single moment. Her mind was spinning with everything that had just happened. Ethan's threat still hung heavy in the air, his words echoing in her mind. He would stop at nothing to keep his secrets buried, and now she was in deeper than ever before. As they turned a corner, Emma spotted a car parked along the curb. Alex gestured toward it, and they quickly moved toward it, slipping into the backseat without a word. Alex started the engine and pulled away from the curb, blending in with the traffic. Emma glanced back, her heart still racing, but there was no sign of anyone following them. For now, they were safe. Alex drove through the city with quiet determination, weaving through the streets, always watching the rearview mirror. Emma sat back, trying to steady her breath, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She had narrowly escaped Ethan's clutches, but she knew this wasn't over. Ethan had shown her just how far he was willing to go to protect his secrets, and now she was more entangled in his web than ever before. "What's going on, Alex?" she asked, breaking the silence. "How did you know where I was?" Alex glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable. "I've been watching you too," he admitted, his tone calm but laced with an edge of something darker. "I knew you were digging into Ethan. You should have been more careful." Emma's brow furrowed. "What does that mean? You've been watching me." Alex sighed, his fingers tightening around the steering wheel. "It's not as simple as it seems, Emma. I'm not just a bystander in all of this. I'm involved whether you like it or not." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean? You knew everything?" Alex's eyes flickered to the road, his expression shifting slightly. "I've been investigating Ethan for a long time. I'm not just some reporter looking for a story. I've been trying to bring him down too." Emma's head spun. She had no idea what to make of this new information. Was Alex on her side, or was he playing her just like Ethan had? "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice tight with frustration. "Why keep this from me?" Alex exhaled sharply, his grip still tight on the wheel. "It's complicated. I've had my reasons, but we don't have time for that now. What's important is that we stick together. Ethan's not going to stop. He'll come after both of us now." Emma felt a mix of anger and disbelief. She wanted to trust Alex, she really did, but this was too much. Everything she thought she knew about him was suddenly in question. Had he been manipulating her all along, or was this some twisted game that she had walked right into? "I don't know if I can trust you," she muttered, more to herself than to Alex. "How do I know you're not working with him?" Alex's gaze flickered to her once more, his eyes intense but calm. "You don't have to trust me, Emma. But right now, I'm your best chance at surviving this." She looked at him, searching for any sign of deception, but all she saw was a man who seemed just as torn as she felt. He was hiding something, she was sure of it, but so was Ethan. And right now, Alex was her only ally. They arrived at his apartment, an unassuming building in a quiet part of the city, and Alex led her inside. The apartment was modest but well kept, with minimal decoration and an almost sterile atmosphere. Emma sat down on the couch, still trying to make sense of everything. "I'll make us some coffee," Alex said, his voice softer now. He moved to the kitchen, and Emma heard the sound of the coffee machine starting up. She sat in silence, her mind racing with questions. What was Alex's involvement in all of this? How much did he really know? And most importantly, what was Ethan planning next? She had uncovered some of the pieces of the puzzle, but there were still too many gaps, too many unknowns. When Alex returned with the coffee, he handed her a mug and sat down beside her. "We need to come up with a plan," he said, his tone serious. "You can't go back to Graves Enterprises. Not now, not while Ethan knows what you're up to." Emma nodded, her fingers curling around the warm mug, the heat offering some comfort amidst the chaos. She didn't know what the next step was, but she couldn't stop now. She had to expose Ethan. She had to finish what she started. "How do we bring him down?" She asked quietly, her voice full of determination. Alex looked at her for a long moment, his eyes hard with resolve. "First, we need to find the right leverage, and I think I know exactly where to start." The dim light in Alex's apartment flickered as Emma sat, her mind swirling with the weight of what lay ahead. The quiet buzz of the coffee machine's hum was the only sound in the room as Alex placed his cup on the table and met her gaze. "Leverage?" Emma asked, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "What do you mean by that?" Alex leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. He was calm now, a stark contrast to the urgency in his voice moments ago. "Ethan has a weakness, Emma, a big one. We need to find it, exploit it, and use it against him." Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wasn't sure she liked the idea of playing a game so dangerous, especially one where the stakes were so high. But she had no choice now. Ethan had dragged her into this mess, and there was no turning back. She had to see it through. "What's his weakness?" she asked, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. Alex didn't answer immediately. He stood up and walked over to a small desk in the corner of the room. The sound of papers rustling filled the silence as he sifted through a pile of documents. He pulled out a folder and brought it back to the table. Emma leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "This," Alex said, sliding the folder across the table. "This is where we start." Emma hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were a series of photos, emails, and documents, all centered around Ethan. At first glance, it looked like a typical corporate dossier. But as Emma scanned the pages, one name caught her attention, someone she hadn't expected. "Who is this?" she asked, pointing to a photo of a woman with long dark hair standing next to Ethan at a gala. She was smiling, looking every bit the image of elegance, but Emma could see the subtle tension in Ethan's posture. There was something about the woman's presence that seemed off. "Her name's Veronica," Alex explained, his voice low. "She's been in Ethan's life for a long time. More than just business, I'd wager. I think she's his biggest secret, Emma. If we can find out what's going on between them, we might be able to force Ethan's hand." Emma's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by that?" "What's the connection between them?" Alex leaned in, his expression serious. "I've been tracking Ethan for months. Veronica is involved in some of his darker dealings, things he doesn't want the world to know. She's his insurance, his way of covering his tracks. But she's also a liability. If she's exposed, it could destroy everything he's built." Emma stared at the photo again, her mind racing. Veronica was beautiful, poised, and appeared completely at ease with Ethan. But now, looking at it through the lens of Alex's words, she could see the cracks beneath the surface. There was a story there, one that Ethan didn't want to be told. "But how do we get to her?" Emma asked. "She's probably just as protected as Ethan, if not more." "That's where you come in," Alex said with a slight grin. "You have a way of getting people to talk, and Veronica is no different. She's smart, but she has one weakness: she thinks she's untouchable. If you get close to her, gain her trust, you might be able to get her to slip up. We need information, Emma, the right kind of leverage. Once we have that, we can expose Ethan for everything he's done." Emma wasn't sure if she was ready for the kind of manipulation Alex was suggesting, but there was no denying the gravity of the situation. Ethan was a dangerous man, and if she wanted to bring him down, she'd have to play a dangerous game. The thought of getting close to Veronica, of pretending to be someone she wasn't, made her uneasy, but it was the only option. "I don't know, Alex," she said, her voice uncertain. "This feels wrong. I'm not a spy. I don't know how to do this." "You don't have to be a spy," Alex reassured her. "Just be yourself. She's going to think you're just another woman trying to get into Ethan's world. Use that to your advantage. We need her to trust you, to see you as a confidant." Once that happens, you'll have the upper hand. Emma swallowed hard, her mind racing. The idea of deceiving someone, even for a greater purpose, didn't sit well with her, but if there was even a chance this could work, she had to try. She couldn't let Ethan win. How do we even get to her? She asked, looking at Alex for guidance. Leave that to me, Alex said with a glint in his eye. I have connections. I can get you a meeting with her, a chance to get in her circle. After that, it's up to you. Emma nodded slowly, still unsure of what she was getting herself into, but knowing it was the only way forward. The danger of the situation was starting to feel more real, more immediate. There was no turning back now. All right, she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. Let's do it. I'll do whatever it takes to bring him down. Alex gave her a sharp look, his gaze softening for just a moment. Good, we're in this together now, Emma. We'll make it through this. With that, he stood up and walked to the door. Emma followed him, a sinking feeling settling in her stomach. The night had only just begun, and there was still so much more at stake. The following days were a blur of preparation and tension. Alex worked tirelessly, making calls and using his connections to get Emma a meeting with Veronica. It wasn't easy, but Alex had a way with people, and soon enough he had secured an invitation to one of the city's most exclusive charity galas, the perfect setting for Emma to meet Veronica. Emma spent hours preparing for the event, choosing a sleek black dress that made her feel both confident and understated. She was careful with her makeup, opting for a natural look, and her hair fell in soft waves, framing her face perfectly. As she looked at her reflection in the mirror, her heart raced. This wasn't just a gala, it was a trap. A chance to get close to a dangerous woman and, through her, gain leverage on Ethan. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort that settled deep within her gut. Are you ready? Alex asked, standing in the doorway. He was impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, his hair neatly styled, but his eyes betrayed a trace of concern. You look perfect. Emma offered him a weak smile, though her nerves were clearly getting the best of her. I don't know about perfect, but I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Alex studied her for a moment, then walked over and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be watching you the entire time. Just remember why we're here. She nodded, feeling the weight of his words. Ethan had to be stopped. And if getting close to Veronica was the way to do it, she couldn't hesitate. She took a deep breath and followed Alex out the door. They arrived at the gala shortly after, the lavish event held in a towering skyscraper overlooking the city. The entrance was lined with luxury cars, and the interior of the venue was bathed in golden light, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling. The guests were a mix of the city's elite, business tycoons, celebrities, and socialites, each more glamorous than the last. Emma felt out of place among them, but she knew she had to blend in, act as though she belonged. Alex guided her through the crowd, his presence commanding yet unobtrusive. He exchanged polite greetings with a few familiar faces, but his attention remained focused on Emma. His lips were set in a thin line, his jaw clenched, as though he were just as tense as she was. Keep your cool, he whispered as they neared the bar. Veronica should be here any minute. She likes to make a grand entrance. Emma scanned the room, her eyes searching for any sign of the woman Alex had described. It didn't take long before she spotted her. Veronica entered the room like she owned it, her tall frame moving gracefully through the crowd. She wore a shimmering gold dress that caught the light with every step, and her dark hair was styled in sleek waves. She exuded confidence, and her eyes glinted with a knowing, almost predatory look. That's her, Alex murmured, as if reading Emma's thoughts. She's dangerous, Emma. Keep your guard up. Emma nodded, trying to swallow her nerves. As Veronica moved through the crowd, Emma caught her gaze. There was a flicker of recognition, something in Veronica's eyes that made Emma's skin crawl. But Veronica didn't stop. She continued walking, greeting people with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Emma had no doubt she was just as calculating as Alex had warned. Come on, Alex said, nudging Emma gently. Let's get closer. They moved through the crowd, navigating the maze of expensive suits and extravagant gowns. Emma's heart raced as they closed the distance between her and Veronica. She could hear the hum of conversations around her, the clink of glasses, and the soft music playing in the background, but everything felt muffled. The closer she got, the more her senses heightened. This was it, this was her chance. Just as they were about to approach Veronica, Alex stopped, placing a hand on Emma's arm. Let me handle the introduction, he said quietly. Stay calm and don't let her see through you. Emma nodded, though her pulse was pounding in her ears. Alex approached Veronica, his steps confident, and with a charming smile he greeted her. Veronica, Alex said, his voice smooth. It's been a while. Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly as she turned toward him. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by a calculated smile. "Alex," she said, her voice cool, "I wasn't expecting to see you here tonight." "I make a habit of surprising people," Alex replied, his smile never faltering. "But I couldn't resist the opportunity to reconnect. Allow me to introduce you to Emma." He gestured toward Emma, who felt her throat tighten. Veronica's gaze slid toward Emma, her eyes studying her with a sharp intensity that made Emma feel like she was being dissected. But then Veronica's lips curled into a polite smile, and she extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Emma," Veronica said, her voice smooth as velvet. "It's always a pleasure to meet new faces in the circle." Emma shook her hand, her mind racing. She had to keep it together. She had to play this right. "The pleasure's mine," Emma said, her voice steady but polite. The three of them exchanged pleasantries, and Emma could feel the tension between her and Veronica. This was no ordinary social encounter. Veronica was sizing her up, trying to figure out who she was, what she wanted, and what her angle was. Emma had no choice but to play along, to act as though she was just another woman at the gala. Alex, seemingly aware of the delicate dance they were performing, kept the conversation light, steering it away from anything too personal. But as they talked, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Veronica was still watching her, looking for any crack in her facade. It was like playing a game of chess, and Emma had to stay one move ahead. Her chance had come, but now the real challenge was just beginning. The night stretched on in a haze of laughter and clinking glasses. The gala felt like an endless sea of smiles, but Emma was barely aware of the conversations happening around her. Her entire focus was on Veronica, whose calculating gaze never seemed to leave her. There was an almost palpable tension between them, a dance that Emma had to navigate carefully. Alex had stepped away, giving Emma the space to engage with Veronica. It was a calculated move, but it left Emma feeling exposed. She had to find a way in, some way to earn Veronica's trust and dig deeper into the secrets that Ethan was hiding. But Veronica wasn't making it easy. She was all charm, but Emma could feel the sharpness lurking beneath. "So, Emma," Veronica began, her voice low and smooth, "what brings you to a night like this? Surely, a woman with such grace doesn't just wander into these circles by accident." Emma forced a smile, hoping it looked genuine. "I suppose you could say I'm looking for new opportunities," she replied, keeping her tone light but with a hint of mystery. She needed Veronica to believe she was just another ambitious socialite hoping to climb the ladder. Veronica raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "Opportunities, huh? In what line of work, if you don't mind me asking?" Emma hesitated for just a moment, weighing her options. "I've been involved in some projects," she said cryptically, letting her words hang in the air. She could see the way Veronica's eyes sharpened at the mention of projects. Veronica was no fool. She had to know there was more to Emma's story than what she was letting on, but Emma couldn't afford to slip up. She had to keep things vague to avoid revealing her true intentions. Veronica smiled again, but this time there was something colder about it. "Interesting. I always enjoy meeting women with ambition." She took a sip of her drink, her gaze still fixed on Emma. "Tell me, what exactly do you hope to gain from mingling with people like us?" Emma felt a flicker of nervousness in her chest but pushed it down. "I believe in making the right connections," she said, her voice smooth. "It's all about finding the right people, isn't it?" Veronica laughed softly, but it was a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Indeed," she said, her smile never faltering. "But be careful. People like us," she gestured around the room, "don't take kindly to those who try to take more than their share. There's always a price to pay." Emma's stomach tightened. Veronica's words weren't just a warning, they were a challenge. She was testing her, and Emma had to show that she wasn't afraid to play the game. Before she could respond, a voice interrupted them. "Veronica, darling, I see you found someone new to entertain you." The voice was smooth, with a touch of arrogance. Emma turned to see a tall man in a tailored suit approaching them. He was older, with salt and pepper hair and a predatory gleam in his eyes. Veronica's expression softened at the sight of him, but only just. "Ah, James," Veronica said, her tone still polite but colder now. "This is Emma. Emma, this is James, a friend of mine in the business world." James extended a hand, and Emma shook it, feeling the firm grip. There was something about him that put her on edge, something dangerous lurking behind the polished exterior. He smiled at her, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was calculated, like a man used to getting what he wanted. "Pleasure," James said, his gaze flicking between Emma and Veronica. "I've heard a lot about you. I must say, I'm curious what someone like you is doing here tonight." Emma was quick to respond, her smile never wavering. "I'm just getting to know the right people," she said, repeating her earlier line. "Connections are important." James chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that made Emma's skin crawl. "Yes, of course, but remember, not all connections are equal. Some people you want to be seen with and others you'd be better off avoiding." It was a thinly veiled threat, and Emma could see Veronica's eyes glinting with amusement. They were testing her, pushing her to reveal her true intentions. But Emma refused to back down. She wouldn't let them see her doubt. "I understand," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I suppose it's a matter of knowing who to trust, isn't it?" Veronica's eyes softened, but only slightly. She was still sizing Emma up, trying to figure out if she was a threat. And Emma knew that if she didn't play her cards right, she would be dismissed as just another ambitious woman in a sea of pretenders. She needed to do something, say something, that would make Veronica think twice about her. "Tell me, Emma," Veronica said, her tone shifting, becoming more interested. "What exactly is it you're looking for in the business world? What kind of projects do you really want to be a part of?" Emma hesitated, but only for a fraction of a second. She had to choose her words carefully. "I've heard whispers," she began, her voice just low enough to hint at something more. "Whispers about things, deals, that don't quite fit the image. But sometimes those are the most interesting, aren't they?" For the first time, Veronica's eyes narrowed, her interest piqued. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice lowering to match Emma's. Emma smiled inwardly. She had her hook. The question was whether Veronica would take the bait. "Some things are too tempting to ignore," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "And I'm the kind of person who likes to uncover the truth." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Emma knew she had just crossed a line. It was no longer just a casual conversation. She had given Veronica a glimpse into her true intentions, and now the ball was in Veronica's court. Would she bite? Veronica's eyes flickered, a subtle shift that Emma barely caught. For a moment, the world around them seemed to slow, the music and chatter fading into the background as Veronica's gaze locked onto Emma. There was a sharpness in her eyes, an edge that suggested she knew exactly what Emma was doing. And yet, she didn't retreat. She leaned in, as if the challenge intrigued her. "You're bold," Veronica said, her voice almost a whisper, but laced with an unmistakable edge. "I can respect that." Emma kept her expression neutral, hiding the surge of satisfaction inside her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where Veronica realized she wasn't just another social climber. She wasn't just trying to network for the sake of wealth or power. She had her own agenda, and Emma could see it, a flicker of wariness in Veronica's eyes. "I'm not afraid of getting my hands dirty," Emma replied coolly, her gaze unwavering. "And sometimes the truth is buried so deep that it takes someone persistent to find it." Veronica smiled, but it was more of a challenge than a warmth. "Well, Emma," she said, standing up straight again, "you may be in over your head, but I'm curious, very curious. Keep playing your game and we'll see how long you last." Her words hung heavy between them. The quiet threat was unmistakable, but so was the strange sense of respect. Veronica wasn't pushing her away. In fact, she seemed almost impressed. It was a dangerous game, and Emma knew she had to be careful. One wrong move and she could find herself trapped in a web that she couldn't escape. But she wasn't going to back down. Not now. Before Emma could respond, Alex returned, slipping his arm around her waist possessively. His touch was a clear signal. He was marking his territory. He leaned down to whisper in her ear, his lips brushing against her skin. "Everything all right?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, giving him a small, reassuring smile. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "Just a little chat with Veronica." Alex didn't miss the tension in the air. His eyes flicked to Veronica, who was still watching them with a knowing smile. "I see," he said, his tone tight. "Well, I'm glad you're getting along." Veronica, for her part, offered Alex a polite nod, but the undercurrent of animosity was clear. "We were just talking about connections," she said, her gaze drifting back to Emma. "It seems Emma has quite an interesting take on things." Alex raised an eyebrow but didn't respond directly. He was used to playing the game, and this wasn't his first time encountering power plays. Still, Emma could feel the subtle shift in the air, an unspoken message between the two women. Veronica was sizing her up, testing her limits, and Emma was determined to pass the test. "Well, I think it's time we circulate," Alex said, steering Emma away from Veronica with a firm grip on her waist. His possessiveness was both protective and a little calculating. He didn't want Emma getting too close to anyone who might pose a threat. And at this moment, Veronica was definitely a threat. Emma didn't resist as Alex guided her through the crowd. She had to admit, Part of her felt a sense of relief to be away from the tension, but another part of her wanted to keep pushing forward, keep digging into the mystery that was Veronica. There was something about her that Emma couldn't quite put her finger on. She was too polished, too perfect, but it was the cracks in that perfect facade that intrigued Emma the most. As they moved deeper into the gala, Emma kept her thoughts focused on the night ahead. There were still plenty of people to meet, more information to gather. The evening wasn't over yet, and she knew there was much more to uncover. They approached a group of influential figures, their laughter filling the air. Alex's colleagues, familiar faces in the world of high finance, greeted him warmly. Emma was introduced to a few of them, their interest polite but detached. She played the role of the interested, attentive partner, nodding along to conversations about stock markets and acquisitions, all the while keeping a mental note of who was saying what. It was easy to tell who had the power in this room and who was just a bystander. At one point, she found herself standing next to a woman in her 50s, a business mogul who had built her empire from the ground up. The woman's name was Sarah, and she was known for her ruthless decision-making. Emma had heard of her, but this was the first time they had met in person. "You're Alex's girlfriend, aren't you?" Sarah asked, her sharp eyes studying Emma intently. Emma forced a smile, maintaining her composure. "That's right. I've heard good things about you," Sarah continued, her voice low. "I must admit I'm impressed with your ambition. Not many women have the nerve to navigate this world." Emma nodded, her smile widening just slightly. "I believe in taking chances," she said. "You have to if you want to make a real impact." Sarah seemed to appraise her, her lips curling into a thin smile. "Indeed," she said. "But remember, some chances are more dangerous than others, and not all risks are worth taking." The words were pointed, and Emma felt the weight of them. It was a warning, one that made her realize just how precarious her position was. She was walking a fine line, balancing between gaining trust and exposing her true motives. The last thing she wanted was to be viewed as a threat. Not yet, at least. "We'll see," Emma replied cryptically, her eyes meeting Sarah's with a quiet determination. As the evening wore on, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that every word, every glance was part of a larger game. Veronica's cryptic remarks, Sarah's veiled threats, it was all adding up, and Emma was more certain than ever that the truth was within her reach. All she had to do was keep pushing, keep playing her part. And soon, she would uncover the secrets that Ethan had fought so hard to keep hidden. The night wore on, and the tension in the room seemed to grow thicker. Emma's mind raced as she navigated through conversation after conversation, each one seemingly more calculated than the last. She could feel the weight of the secrets all around her, the carefully constructed facades everyone wore like armor. But Emma wasn't like them. She wasn't here to play the game for the sake of appearances. She was here for something deeper. It wasn't just about gaining power or prestige. It wasn't just about impressing people like Veronica or Sarah, who would only see her as a pawn in their own games. No, Emma had a much clearer vision. She was here to uncover the truth about Ethan, to find out why he had been so protective of his secrets, so determined to keep her at arm's length. What was he hiding? Her thoughts were interrupted as she felt Alex's hand on her lower back, guiding her toward another group of guests. His presence was a constant, a reminder that he had his own agenda for the evening, his own plans and alliances to maintain. But Emma couldn't afford to be distracted. She couldn't let him pull her away from the mission she had set for herself. She had to stay focused. "Come on, Emma," Alex said, his voice laced with a subtle impatience. "We should make the rounds. We don't want to miss any opportunities." Emma forced a smile and nodded. "Of course." She let him lead her to the next group of influential individuals, including a few prominent business figures that Alex had been cultivating relationships with for years. They exchanged pleasantries, discussing the latest acquisitions and mergers, but Emma's mind was elsewhere. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of Veronica, any clue that might lead her to unraveling the mystery that Ethan had worked so hard to keep buried. And then she saw it. Across the room, Veronica stood in a corner, engaged in a conversation with a man Emma didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a sharp, angular jawline. There was something about him that seemed out of place, as if he didn't quite belong in the world of high society that surrounded them. He was too raw, too real for this polished, glittering environment. But it wasn't just his appearance that caught Emma's attention. It was the way Veronica was looking at him, her eyes narrow, her smile tight and guarded. There was a quiet intensity between them, a shared understanding that didn't belong in a room full of idle chatter and superficial conversation. Emma's heart raced as she watched them. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something about their interaction felt important. She needed to know who this man was, what his connection to Veronica could be, and more importantly, why he was here in a place like this, surrounded by people who would never give someone like him a second glance. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. It was time to get answers. "Excuse me," she said, turning to Alex with a polite smile. "I'm going to step outside for a moment. I need some fresh air." Alex looked at her with a raised eyebrow. "Are you sure? The night's just getting started." Emma nodded. "I'll be right back. Don't worry about me." She excused herself from the conversation, making her way toward the exit with deliberate steps. The cool air hit her as she stepped outside, and she breathed deeply, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of discovering something huge, something that could shatter everything she thought she knew about Ethan, about Veronica, about this world she had only just begun to understand. As she walked down the marble steps leading to the garden area, she glanced back to make sure no one had followed her. She didn't want to be seen alone, not with everything that was at stake. But when she turned the corner, she found herself face to face with the man she had seen talking to Veronica earlier. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was palpable, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea how he had found her, but there he was, standing just a few feet away, his eyes piercing her with an intensity she hadn't expected. "Didn't expect to find you here," the man said, his voice low and gravelly, yet unmistakably confident. Emma's mind raced, trying to place him. He wasn't just anyone. She could tell that much. There was something about him that made her instincts flare. He wasn't just a random guest at the gala. He was someone important, someone powerful. "You must be mistaken," Emma said, her voice cool, trying to hide the surprise she felt. "I'm just getting some air." The man studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as if he was searching for something beneath her carefully constructed facade. "You're not fooling anyone," he said. "You're here for more than just fresh air." Emma didn't flinch. "And you, what are you doing here?" He smiled, a faint smirk curling on his lips. "I could ask you the same thing, but I think we both know the answer." The words hung heavy in the air between them, and Emma's mind raced to piece together the puzzle. This man knew something. He was connected to Veronica, to the mystery she had been chasing, and somehow he had figured her out already. "You're looking for something," he continued, his tone darkening. "Something you won't find so easily, but if you're smart, you'll stay out of it." Emma felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't back down. "I don't scare that easily." The man chuckled softly. "Good. Then I'll be seeing you around." And with that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Emma standing alone in the garden, her heart racing with the realization that the stakes had just been raised. Emma stood still in the garden, the cool night air wrapping around her like a shroud. Her mind buzzed with the encounter, trying to piece together the mysterious man's cryptic words. He knew something that could change everything. But what was it? And why had he approached her? Her thoughts spiraled, but before she could dive deeper into the questions, a rustle from behind her broke her concentration. She turned quickly, her heart still pounding in her chest, only to find Ethan stepping into the garden, his sharp features outlined by the faint light from the windows behind him. His presence was commanding, a contrast to the serenity of the night. "Emma," he said, his voice soft but steady, the way it always was when he spoke to her. "What are you doing out here?" She could feel the tension between them, thick and palpable, but she forced herself to smile. She wasn't about to let him see how rattled she was by the stranger's visit. "Just getting some fresh air," she replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. Ethan studied her for a moment, his gaze flicking to the empty space where the man had just stood. There was something about the way he looked at her, as if he already knew what had happened, as if he knew everything. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern, though she could tell it was more of a polite inquiry than genuine worry. Emma nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Of course, why wouldn't it be?" Ethan didn't answer right away, his jaw tightening as if he were trying to decide whether or not to press further. But after a moment of silence, he gave a short nod, seemingly satisfied with her response. "You know, this event isn't just for appearances," he said, his tone suddenly becoming more serious. "There are things at play here that you might not understand yet." Emma's curiosity piqued, but she didn't let it show. "What things?" she asked casually, masking the urgency that burned beneath her skin. She needed answers, real answers, not the half-truths that Ethan had been feeding her since the beginning. Ethan hesitated, his gaze flicking to the ground before meeting her eyes again. "Things that could change everything for both of us. I don't want you to get involved in something you're not prepared for. A flicker of anger ignited inside Emma. How dare he tell her what she was prepared for? How dare he think she was some naive bystander to his world? She had been an active participant in his life for far too long to be treated like an outsider. But she kept her composure, her voice tight with restrained frustration. I can handle myself, Ethan. I don't need your protection. For a moment, Ethan seemed to consider her words, his expression unreadable. But then, as if reaching a decision, he stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming. You don't understand, he said softly. It's not about protection. It's about keeping you safe from the things you don't know are out there, from the people who would use you to get what they want. Her pulse quickened. Was he referring to the man in the garden? Was he talking about Veronica's mysterious connection to him? Or was there something else she hadn't uncovered yet? Before she could respond, Ethan's hand reached out to gently touch her arm. His fingers were warm, comforting, but there was something else in his touch, something possessive, almost desperate. Please, just trust me. I'm trying to protect you, even if it means keeping you in the dark for a while longer. Emma pulled back slightly, her gaze locking onto his. I don't need you to protect me. I need the truth. The words hung in the air between them, an undeniable barrier. Ethan's eyes softened, his grip loosening on her arm, but the vulnerability that flickered in his expression only made Emma more determined. He was hiding something from her, something important, and she wasn't about to let it slide any longer. She stepped back, a sense of clarity settling over her. I'm not some helpless person, Ethan. I'm not some innocent bystander in your game. I'm involved, whether you want me to be or not. For a moment, he didn't speak, just watched her with a mix of frustration and something else, something almost like guilt. But the moment passed and he gave a resigned sigh. Fine, if you want the truth, you'll get it. But know this, once you have it, there's no going back. There's no undoing what you'll learn. Emma's heart raced. This was it. The moment she'd been waiting for. The moment when everything would finally make sense. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear it. She wasn't sure if the truth would break her more than the lies had already done. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady despite the maelstrom in her chest. Tell me. Ethan's expression hardened, and for the first time, he looked like the man who controlled everything around him, distant, calculating, and cold. It's about Veronica. She's not who you think she is. None of this, none of what you've been told, has been real. Emma's breath caught in her throat, the weight of his words sinking in slowly. Her mind spun with the implications. What did he mean? Was Veronica involved in something more dangerous than she had realized? You're lying, Emma said, her voice shaking, though she tried to remain calm. You can't just— I'm not lying, Ethan interrupted, his voice sharp. I wish I were, but I'm not. Veronica is connected to everything. The man you saw earlier, he's part of it, all of it. Emma took a step back, her mind reeling with the chaos of his confession. What do you mean? What's happening, Ethan? What aren't you telling me? His eyes darkened. You'll find out soon enough, just don't say I didn't warn you. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing alone in the garden, the pieces of her life shifting in ways she couldn't yet understand. Emma stood frozen in the garden, Ethan's cryptic words echoing in her mind. She could still feel the weight of his touch on her arm, his words lingering in the air like a storm that hadn't yet broken. Everything she thought she knew, everything she believed in was being turned upside down. Veronica, the mysterious man, and now Ethan's sudden change in demeanor. It was all connected, but how? Her heart raced as she stared into the dim light of the garden, trying to grasp the gravity of what she had just heard. Veronica, the woman she thought she could trust, was somehow tied to all of this. And then there was Ethan, always so composed, so confident, suddenly revealing a side of himself she hadn't seen before. The walls he had carefully built around himself were crumbling, and in their place, Emma saw something darker, something far more dangerous. She turned toward the house, the door behind her still open, its light spilling out into the night. She didn't want to go inside. She didn't want to face Ethan, not with the flood of questions coursing through her. But she knew she had no choice. There were answers inside, and she couldn't keep running from them. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The house felt colder than before, the air thick with tension. The voices from the ongoing party seemed distant now, muffled and far away, as though they belonged to a different world. Emma's mind was elsewhere, focused solely on the cryptic conversation she had just had with Ethan. As she walked down the hallway toward the living room, she caught a glimpse of Veronica. The woman was standing by the window, staring out at the garden. There was something in her posture, something about the way she held herself, that made Emma pause. Veronica had always been poised, always so confident, but now there was a slight edge to her, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. Veronica, Emma's voice was quieter than usual, tentative. Veronica turned, her face instantly masking any emotion. "Emma," she greeted, her smile cool but polite. "How are you holding up?" Emma didn't trust her smile. It felt forced, too practiced. "I'm fine," she said, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. "Can we talk?" Veronica's eyes flicked toward the door, her gaze sharpening for a brief moment, but then she nodded. "Of course. Let's go to the study. It's quieter there." Emma followed her, each step heavier than the last. She could feel her pulse quicken as they entered the study, the room bathed in soft, golden light from the desk lamp. Veronica closed the door behind them, and the world outside seemed to disappear. "Sit down," Veronica said, motioning toward the armchair by the fireplace. Emma obeyed, though her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Veronica took a seat opposite her, crossing her legs elegantly. "I'm guessing Ethan told you something," she said, her voice casual, as if she didn't have a care in the world. But Emma noticed the slight tremor in her hands as they rested on the arm of the chair. "You're involved in something, aren't you?" Emma's voice was firm now, the weight of everything finally catching up to her. "Something that has to do with that man I saw in the garden. And Ethan, you're both hiding something, and I want to know what it is." Veronica didn't flinch, but Emma saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. For the first time, Veronica seemed unsure. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I didn't want you to get dragged into this, Emma. I wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" Emma scoffed, standing up. "From the truth." "Yes," Veronica said softly, her voice suddenly laced with a quiet intensity. "From the truth that could destroy everything you know." Emma stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" Veronica's gaze flicked to the window, as if she was looking for something outside, something to anchor her. "You're caught in the middle of a web, Emma, a web that started long before you ever arrived here." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What does that mean? And what does it have to do with me?" Veronica let out a deep breath and finally turned to face her fully. "Ethan and we've been part of something much bigger than this. Bigger than you, bigger than all of us." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "What is it? What is this all about?" Veronica stood up then, her movement deliberate and slow. "I can't give you all the answers right now. I can only tell you that you're connected to all of this. Your presence here, it's not just coincidence." Emma's mind reeled. "My presence? What do you mean?" Veronica walked toward the desk, her fingers tracing the edge of the wood absently. "There are people, powerful people, who have been watching you, Emma. They knew you'd come into our lives. They've been planning for this." Emma's skin prickled. "Who are they?" Veronica paused, her expression growing colder. "That man you saw in the garden, he's not just some random person. He's part of a group that has been manipulating events for years, and now you're caught in their game." Emma felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting. "What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you, Emma," Veronica replied, her voice surprisingly gentle. "But you're going to have to decide who you trust. Ethan, me, or someone else. The truth is, we're all just pieces in this game, and you're the most important one." The room seemed to close in around Emma as she tried to process the words. It felt like everything she knew had been a lie. She wasn't just caught in the middle of some family drama, she was at the center of something much larger, something far more dangerous. Veronica gave her a final, unreadable look before walking toward the door. "You'll have to make a choice soon, Emma, and when you do, there's no turning back." As the door closed behind Veronica, Emma stood there, feeling as though her entire world was unraveling. The secrets, the lies, the hidden truths, nothing was as it seemed. And now, more than ever, Emma had to decide who she could trust, but the answer wasn't clear. Not yet. The next morning, Emma woke up with a sense of dread hanging over her. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind, the words Veronica had spoken echoing louder than ever. "You're the most important one," the woman had said. The thought weighed on Emma, pressing down on her chest like a heavy burden. Who could she trust now? Veronica? Ethan? Or was there something else at play here, something bigger and darker that she couldn't yet understand? She stood up, pushing aside the sheets that had barely been disturbed. The room was eerily quiet. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the walls, but Emma couldn't shake the chill that had settled in her bones. She glanced at the clock, almost noon. Time had slipped away unnoticed in the chaos of last night, and now she found herself in a state of paralysis. She needed answers, but she wasn't sure where to begin. With a deep breath, she walked toward the window and looked out over the garden. The mansion looked peaceful from here, a stark contrast to the storm that had stirred inside her the night before. The same garden where she had been caught off guard by the strange man, the one who was somehow tied to all of this. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, breaking her thoughts. She grabbed it quickly, hoping it was something that might bring clarity. It was a message from Ethan. Can we talk? I know you have questions. Meet me in the study at 2 p.m. Emma stared at the message, her heart racing. The sudden urgency in Ethan's words made her uneasy, but it also gave her a sliver of hope. Perhaps at long last he would give her the answers she needed. She didn't want to trust him, but she knew she had no other choice. Time was running out. She quickly dressed in a simple white blouse and dark jeans, trying to calm her nerves as she moved through the house. Each step felt heavier than the last as she made her way to the study, her thoughts spinning. What was Ethan going to say? Would he be honest with her? Could she even trust him? When she reached the study, the door was slightly ajar. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. Ethan was standing by the large wooden desk, his back to her as he stared at a series of papers scattered across the surface. He didn't look up when she entered, and for a moment, there was only silence between them. Emma cleared her throat. You wanted to talk? Ethan turned slowly, his expression unreadable. There was a stiffness in his posture, a tension in the air that felt almost suffocating. I didn't want to get you involved in this, Emma, he began, his voice low, almost regretful. But you need to know the truth. Emma's heart skipped a beat. What truth? What's really going on here, Ethan? He motioned to the chair across from the desk. Please sit down. It's not going to be easy to explain, but you need to hear it. She sat down, crossing her arms defensively, bracing herself for what was to come. Ethan leaned against the desk, taking a moment before speaking again. You've been drawn into a situation that goes beyond just me, beyond just Veronica. This isn't some family drama, Emma. It's bigger than that. The people who are involved in this, they're dangerous, and they've been using you without you even knowing it. Emma frowned, her confusion deepening. What do you mean? How could they use me? I didn't even know who these people were until last night. Ethan's eyes darkened. That's exactly it. You didn't know, but you were always meant to be a part of this. Your family, your background, it's all connected to this, whether you like it or not. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. My family? What are you talking about? Ethan took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to tell her something he had been hiding for a long time. Your father. He was involved in something, a business deal gone wrong, and when he disappeared, it wasn't just a random event. It was planned. It was all part of a bigger scheme, and now they're trying to finish what they started, and you're the key to it all. Emma's mind spun. What do you mean I'm the key? How am I involved in this? Ethan's eyes softened for a moment, as if he were struggling with how much to reveal. You've been marked, Emma. They've been watching you for years, waiting for the right time to pull you into their web. And now that you're here, now that you're with us, they won't stop until they have what they want. Emma felt like she had been punched in the gut. Everything she thought she knew, her father's disappearance, her own life, was a lie. She had always believed her father's disappearance was a tragic accident, a mystery that would never be solved. But now it seemed like it was all part of something much darker, and the truth was staring her right in the face. What do they want from me? Emma asked, her voice trembling. Ethan looked at her, his face hardening. They want control. They want what your father had, and they'll do whatever it takes to get it. But you don't have to be a part of it, Emma. We can protect you. But first, you need to make a choice. Do you want to walk away from this and never look back, or do you want to stand with us and fight? Emma's mind raced. She didn't know what to do, who to trust, or what path to take. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours. She had come here looking for answers, but all she had found was more confusion, more danger. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan stepped closer to her, his expression softening. You don't have to decide now, but remember this, Emma, you're not alone in this. We're in this together. Emma looked up at him, her heart torn between the fear of what she didn't understand and the desperate need to know the truth. She had no choice now but to follow this dark, twisted path wherever it led, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences. Ethan's words lingered in Emma's mind as she walked back to her room, her footsteps echoing down the long hallway. The weight of the decision she had to make pressed heavily on her chest. She wasn't ready to make a choice, not yet, but Ethan's warning was clear. There was no running away from this. She was already in too deep. Her father's name, the one person she thought she could trust, was now part of a web of lies and betrayal. The realization felt like a sinking stone in her stomach. She had always believed her father was a good man, someone who could do no wrong. But now that belief had been shattered. Back in her room, she sank into the chair by the window, staring out at the vast expanse of land surrounding the mansion. The grounds were beautiful, lush green gardens, tall trees, and the distant view of the horizon. But no matter how peaceful it looked, Emma couldn't shake the sense of impending danger. She was trapped, whether she liked it or not. Her mind kept racing through the words Ethan had spoken. The idea that her father had been involved in something sinister, that her family had been tangled in this mess for years, was almost too much to comprehend. It felt like a nightmare, one she couldn't wake up from. There was a soft knock at the door, breaking her thoughts. She stood up quickly, wiping her eyes as she moved toward the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see Veronica standing there. The woman's expression was unreadable, her eyes guarded, but there was a glimmer of something Emma couldn't quite place in the depths of her gaze. "Can I come in?" Veronica asked, her voice gentle. Emma hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. She stepped aside, allowing Veronica to enter. The door clicked shut behind them, and for a brief moment they both stood in silence. "I'm sorry for the way things went last night," Veronica said, her tone sincere. "I didn't mean to add to the confusion. I know it must be overwhelming." Emma didn't know how to respond. How could she trust Veronica after everything that had happened? But at the same time, there was something about the woman that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as much of an enemy as Emma had first thought. "You were right," Emma finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm in the middle of something I don't understand, and it's terrifying." Veronica nodded, stepping further into the room. "It's not easy to accept, but you need to know that we're here to help you. Ethan, myself, we're trying to protect you. You're the key to everything, Emma. Without you, they won't stop." The mention of they sent a chill down Emma's spine. She could feel the weight of those words. The people who were after her father's legacy, were out there somewhere, watching, waiting, and there was no escaping them. Veronica paused, her gaze softening. "Your father wasn't just involved in business deals, Emma. There were things, secrets that no one could ever know about. He was part of something that reached higher than anyone could imagine, and now that legacy is yours to carry." Emma swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the chair. "What kind of legacy? What did he do?" Veronica took a deep breath. "I can't tell you everything right now, but what I can tell you is that your father made enemies, powerful ones, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. You've been caught in the middle, whether you like it or not." Emma felt her heart racing, her thoughts spinning. She wanted to scream, to run away from it all, but there was no way out. She was stuck in this nightmare, and no matter how much she fought it, there was no escaping the truth. "I don't want to be a part of this," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I never asked for any of this, I just want my life back." Veronica shook her head. "I know, but the more you fight it, the more dangerous it becomes. If you want to survive, you have to face what's ahead. You have to make a choice." The choice. That word echoed in Emma's mind, and for a moment, she felt paralyzed. What was she supposed to do? How could she choose when everything around her seemed like a twisted maze with no clear path? "Will you help me?" Emma asked, her voice cracking with emotion. "Will you help me figure this out?" Veronica's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Emma saw the woman as something other than a stranger. She wasn't sure if she could trust her, but something in her gut told her that Veronica might be the only one who could guide her through this. "I'll help you," Veronica said, her voice firm. "But you have to promise me something, Emma. No matter how hard it gets, no matter what they throw at you, you have to stay strong. You have to trust that we're doing this for your safety. There's no turning back once you decide." Emma nodded slowly, the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. She didn't know if she could handle it, but one thing was certain. She was already too deep to turn back now. Veronica walked toward the door, her steps quiet but purposeful. "I'll see you later," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "Remember, you're not alone in this." As the door clicked shut behind Veronica, Emma was left alone in her room, her heart pounding. The world outside had become a dangerous place, and no matter what path she chose, there would be no going back. The decision weighed heavily on her, but it was a decision she had to make. She had no choice. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but Emma knew one thing for sure: she was no longer just a bystander. She was a player in this twisted game, and if she wanted to survive, she would have to fight. Emma sat motionless in the chair, staring at the door long after Veronica had left. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion, uncertainty, and fear. The weight of Veronica's words pressed heavily on her chest. She wasn't sure what to think anymore. One minute, everything was normal, and now, she was plunged into a world of deception, secrets, and enemies she didn't even know existed. She didn't want to be part of this world, didn't want to face the consequences of her father's mistakes. But, as Veronica had said, there was no going back now. She stood up abruptly, pacing around the room, her mind searching for an answer, some kind of solution that didn't involve her having to make a choice. But that was the problem. There were no easy answers, no simple way out of the mess her life had become. She wasn't prepared for this. She wasn't ready to carry the burden of her father's secrets. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, breaking the silence in the room. Emma stopped her pacing and glanced at the time, almost noon. She hadn't realized how long she'd been sitting there, lost in thought. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since breakfast, but food was the last thing on her mind. With a deep sigh, Emma turned and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling estate that her family had owned for years. From here, everything looked calm, peaceful even, but Emma knew that wasn't the truth. The mansion, with its grand halls and polished floors, was just a facade. Beneath it all was a legacy of lies, manipulation, and betrayal, and she was right in the center of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching outside her door. She didn't have to look to know who it was. Ethan had been keeping a close watch on her, making sure she didn't make any rash decisions. He was always there, lurking in the background, ready to intervene if things got out of hand. The knock on the door was soft but firm. "Emma," Ethan's voice called through the wood. "Can I come in?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Come in." The door creaked open, and Ethan stepped inside. He was dressed casually, his usual serious demeanor softened by the concern in his eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just studied her with that piercing gaze of his, as if trying to read her thoughts. "You've been quiet," he finally said, his voice low. "I know this is a lot to take in, but you have to make a decision soon. We're running out of time." Emma shook her head, her frustration rising. "I don't know what to do, Ethan. I can't just accept this. This isn't my life. This isn't who I am." Ethan stepped closer, his presence a comfort, though it did little to calm the storm inside her. "I know," he said softly, "but you don't have a choice. They'll come for you. And when they do, you need to be ready. If you stay here in the mansion, you'll be in constant danger. You have to trust me, Emma." Emma met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe that everything would work out, that there was some way to fix this. But the doubt, the fear, was too strong. How could she trust anyone when her entire world had been built on lies? "I don't know who to trust anymore," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do I know you're not using me too?" Ethan's face softened, and he stepped even closer, so close that Emma could feel the warmth radiating off him. "I'm not using you," he said earnestly. "I'm trying to help you, but you have to help yourself too. I can't fight this battle for you. You're stronger than you think. Don't let fear control you." Emma closed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't sure if she believed him, but deep down, a part of her knew that he was right. She couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, the truth would come out, and when it did, she would have to face the consequences. She opened her eyes and looked at him again. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to her. "This is a file with everything you need to know. Your father's past, the people involved, and the decisions you'll have to make. It's not going to be easy, but it's the only way you can make sense of all this." Emma took the envelope from him, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't want to open it. She didn't want to know the full extent of the mess she was caught up in. But she also knew that she didn't have a choice. She had to understand what had been happening in the shadows of her family's life, or she would never be able to move forward. Ethan gave her a reassuring look, then turned to leave. "I'll be in touch," he said. "When you're ready, we'll make a plan." As the door closed behind him, Emma stood frozen, staring at the envelope in her hands. Her mind raced with thoughts of what was inside, secrets, lies, and things she wasn't sure she could handle. But there was no going back now. She had to face whatever was coming, and the first step was opening the envelope. With a deep breath, Emma tore open the envelope, her heart pounding in her chest as she pulled out the contents. There was no turning back from this moment. Whatever it was, she would have to face it head-on. The journey was just beginning. Emma unfolded the file with trembling hands, the paper stiff beneath her fingers. Her heart beat erratically in her chest as she hesitated, staring at the neatly printed words on the first page. She knew that opening this file would change everything. Nothing would be the same afterward. Her entire life, her sense of reality, had already been shattered by Veronica's cryptic warning, and now the contents of this file might confirm all her worst fears. She took a deep breath and began reading. The first document was a detailed timeline, one that seemed to stretch back decades. It chronicled the rise of her father's empire, the dark deals, the money laundering, and the secrets that had been buried beneath the surface. Emma's stomach churned as she read about the alliances he had forged with dangerous figures she'd never even heard of. Her father, the man she had always looked up to, had been involved in things that went far beyond business. He had woven a tangled web, one that stretched into the deepest corners of the criminal world. The next page contained names she recognized, names that were supposed to be clean and respectable. But the names were tied to people she'd never associated with corruption, people who had hidden their true faces behind polished smiles and expensive suits. Her father's friends, associates, and even mentors were part of this network, and Emma's stomach tightened with each new revelation. The file went on, detailing the years of manipulation, power struggles, and betrayals that had shaped her family's legacy. Each page seemed to reveal something worse than the last, and Emma could feel the weight of it crushing her. She couldn't believe what she was reading. She had known her father was secretive, but this was something entirely different. This wasn't just a man with a few shady business dealings, this was a criminal mastermind. Her hands shook as she turned the page to the final document, a letter from her father to an unknown recipient. It was dated just weeks before his death. The words were chilling. "The time has come. I've done what I set out to do, but it seems the price has been higher than I expected. They know what I've been hiding, and they won't stop until they have it. If anything happens to me, you must protect her. She is the key to everything. She is the one who can end this, one way or another. I trust you with her safety, but she must know the truth. Keep her close." Emma's breath caught in her throat as she finished reading. The words, "she is the key to everything," echoed in her mind like a death sentence. What was her father trying to say? What truth did she need to know? The thought that her life, everything she had known, was tied to her father's dark past made her feel sick. She closed the file and put it down, her mind reeling. The room around her seemed to blur as she tried to process what she had just read. She had to get answers, but from where? Who could she trust? Her father had kept so many secrets, and now it seemed as though his entire life had been one long game of deceit. The knock at the door broke her reverie, pulling her back into the present. She stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her pants as she made her way to the door. It was Ethan again. "I see you've read it," he said quietly, his expression unreadable. Emma nodded, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. I didn't know any of this." Her voice trembled, the weight of the secrets she had uncovered pressing heavily on her chest. Ethan stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said softly, "but now you know the truth. And it's time for you to decide what comes next." "What happens next?" Emma asked, her voice thick with emotion. She could feel the anger bubbling inside her. How had her father kept this from her? How had she been so blind? "We move forward," Ethan replied. "You're part of this world now, Emma. You've been for a long time, even if you didn't know it, but you don't have to face it alone. We can figure this out together." She shook her head, pacing the room. "I don't want any part of this world." "I never asked for any of this." Ethan's eyes softened. "I know you didn't, but you don't get to choose your legacy. Your father made those choices for you long ago. All we can do now is pick up the pieces and figure out how to survive." Emma stopped pacing, staring at him. "How do I even begin to survive this? How do I live with the knowledge that my father was involved in all of this, that my entire life has been a lie?" Ethan stepped closer, his tone serious. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll be here to help you every step of the way. But you need to understand one thing, there's no going back now. The people who are after you won't stop until they get what they want. You can either run and hide, or you can stand and fight. The choice is yours." Emma swallowed hard, her mind spinning with fear and uncertainty. What was the right choice? Could she really stand up to the people her father had angered? Could she take on this responsibility, knowing what was at stake? She looked at Ethan, his face steady and unwavering. Despite the doubts clouding her thoughts, one thing was clear. She wasn't alone in this. He was right about that. "I don't know if I can fight this," Emma said, her voice breaking, "but I can't run either." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her decision. "Then we'll do it together. But first, we need to find out who exactly is after you and what they want. We can't go in blind." Emma nodded, her heart still heavy with the burden of everything she had just learned. But one thing was certain, there was no turning back. The path ahead was unclear, but she wasn't walking it alone. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Emma stood in the center of the room, the weight of everything crashing down on her shoulders. She had always imagined a different future, one where she could breathe easily, unburdened by secrets and lies. But now, everything had changed. Her father's legacy, his empire, had been built on deception, and now it was her turn to face the consequences. Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts, a steady anchor in the chaos swirling around her. "We need to figure out who's behind this, and fast. You've already seen what they're capable of, Emma." She nodded slowly, still processing the enormity of the situation. "I know, but where do we even start?" Ethan's eyes narrowed with determination. "We start by going through everything your father left behind. There's a reason he trusted you with that file. It's not just to show you his sins, it's a map, a guide to what comes next. He wouldn't have left that for you if he didn't think you were ready. The words stung, but Emma knew he was right. Her father had never treated her like a child, even if he had kept her in the dark about his true dealings. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was her reality now. She looked at Ethan, his steady gaze offering a quiet reassurance. So, what's the plan? First, we dig deeper into the names in that file. Some of them are people from your father's past, but others, they're still active in the game. We need to know who's still pulling the strings. Emma hesitated for a moment before speaking. What if we're too late? What if they've already made their move? We won't know until we try, Ethan replied, his voice firm. But the sooner we get moving, the better. If we stay still, we're sitting ducks. Emma felt a spark of determination ignite in her chest. She wasn't going to sit back and wait to be taken down by her father's enemies. She wasn't her father, and she wouldn't let his mistakes define her. We'll start with the list of names, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. But we can't do it alone. We need to find allies, people who can help us navigate this world. Ethan's lips curled into a half smile. I already have a few people in mind, but you're right, we'll need all the help we can get. This won't be easy, and it won't be quick. Emma nodded, taking a deep breath. She had to keep moving forward. She had no choice now. Her life had already been upended, and there was no way to return to the life she once knew. But maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to rewrite her story, one where she took control, one where she wasn't the victim. She glanced down at the file again, her mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. She would start by finding out who was still loyal to her father, who might be willing to help her. And she would need to figure out who was after her and why, but one thing was clear, she couldn't do it alone. She would need Ethan and anyone else who was willing to stand by her side. I'm ready, she said, meeting Ethan's eyes. Let's get started. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. We'll move carefully. We can't afford any mistakes. Agreed, Emma said. She looked down at the file again, determination flooding her veins. She wasn't going to let her father's mistakes destroy her. She was going to take charge of her own future. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, research, and planning. Emma had to adjust quickly to a world she had never known, one that was dangerous and full of hidden agendas. But with Ethan by her side, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't had before. The more they dug into the names in her father's file, the more they realized just how deep the web of corruption went. One name kept popping up, Victor Hayes. He was a powerful figure in the world her father had navigated, and his influence extended far beyond what Emma had imagined. Victor was the key. He was connected to nearly every transaction, every deal, every shady business practice that her father had been involved in. But what Emma couldn't understand was why he had never been mentioned to her directly. Why had her father kept his involvement with Victor hidden? They found an address tied to Victor's name, a lavish estate on the outskirts of the city. Emma's stomach turned as she thought about confronting him, but if she was going to take control of her life, she had to face these people, no matter how terrifying they were. Ethan looked at her, his eyes sharp with focus. Are you ready for this? Emma swallowed hard, her nerves tightening. I have to be. The car ride to Victor's estate was silent, the tension thick between them. Emma's mind was spinning with questions. What did Victor know? What was he willing to do to protect his secrets? And most importantly, how much danger was she in? As the car pulled up to the gates of the estate, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The mansion before her was enormous, its walls adorned with expensive artwork and its grounds manicured to perfection. It was the kind of place that screamed power and wealth, but to Emma, it was a symbol of everything she was fighting against. We need to be careful, Ethan murmured, his hand resting on the door handle. Victor won't take kindly to being confronted. I know, Emma replied quietly. She had no illusions about the risks they were taking, but it was time to confront the darkness her father had left behind, and she wasn't going to back down now. The door of the mansion opened, and a tall man with a sharp, calculating gaze appeared. Victor Hayes, the man who held the key to everything. Miss Knight, he said, his voice smooth and cold. I've been expecting you. Emma's heart raced as she stepped out of the car, ready to face whatever came next. Victor Hayes stood there, his imposing figure framed by the grand doorway of his estate. His sharp, calculating gaze bore into Emma, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. He knew who she was, and by the way he greeted her, it was clear he had been anticipating her arrival. There was no warmth in his voice, no friendliness, just a cold acknowledgement that this moment had come to pass. Miss Knight, he said, the words coming out with a smooth, almost practiced ease. I've been expecting you. Emma stood her ground, refusing to let any fear show in her posture. She had come too far to back down now. The world her father had left her was filled with shadowy figures like Victor, men who played games with lives, who thought they could manipulate everything around them. But Emma was done being controlled. Victor's eyes flicked to Ethan, who stood beside her, arms crossed and ready for anything. He was her rock, her unwavering protector. His presence gave her the courage she needed to face this man. Ethan was the one who had urged her to confront Victor, and now, as much as Emma hated this world her father had drawn her into, she knew Ethan was right. She couldn't hide anymore. She had to take control. "Let's get to the point," Emma said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I want answers, Victor. I know about the deals you made with my father. I know about the lies and the secrets, and now, I want to know everything. What did he leave behind, and why does it involve me?" Victor's lips curled into a slow, predatory smile. He stepped forward, the sound of his polished shoes echoing in the vast entryway. "You think you can just walk in here and demand answers, Miss Knight?" His tone was laced with amusement, but there was no mistaking the edge of danger in his words. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You don't understand the game your father played, and you certainly don't understand the players." Emma didn't flinch. She had spent days studying her father's dealings, piecing together fragments of information, and she knew she couldn't back down now. "I understand more than you think. I know my father's empire was built on secrets, on power plays, on things that go far beyond money. But I also know that power is fleeting, Victor. Sooner or later, everyone's secrets come out." Victor's smile faded slightly, his eyes narrowing as he regarded her with a more calculating gaze. "You're a clever girl, Emma, I'll give you that. But cleverness won't save you here. You've walked into a world that you don't belong to, and now you're in my territory." For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken threats. Then Victor waved his hand dismissively. "Come in," he said, his voice now carrying a faintly mocking tone. "We can talk inside. It's not often I have visitors who think they can dictate the terms of our conversation, but I suppose I'll humor you." Emma stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors as she walked past him and into the opulent foyer of his mansion. Ethan followed closely behind, his presence a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Victor led them through a maze of corridors, the mansion almost eerily quiet except for the sound of their footsteps. The walls were lined with expensive art, each piece more lavish than the last. It was clear that Victor Hayes wasn't just a businessman, he was someone who enjoyed power in every aspect of his life, even in his decor. Finally, they reached a private study, its rich wood paneling giving the room a sense of authority. Victor gestured for Emma to sit, though he did not offer the same courtesy to Ethan. Instead, he remained standing, leaning against the desk with his arms crossed. Emma sat across from him, her posture straight and commanding. She refused to show any sign of vulnerability, no matter how much her mind screamed for answers. This was her chance to take control of her fate, to confront the man who had been pulling the strings in her father's shadowy world. "I'm not interested in your games, Victor," she said, locking eyes with him. "Tell me what I need to know. Why is my father's empire still in play? Why am I the one they're coming for?" Victor let out a low chuckle, but it lacked warmth. "You think you're ready for the truth? That you can just step into your father's world and understand it?" "Your father was a man who played with fire, Emma. And now that he's gone, the fire is about to consume everything in its path, including you." Emma clenched her fists, her anger bubbling up despite her best efforts to remain composed. "Enough with the cryptic talk. Just tell me, what does this all have to do with me?" Victor's smile returned, but this time it was a knowing, almost sympathetic smile. "You think you're ready for this world, the one your father built on lies, betrayals, and manipulation. You want to take it over, you want to tear it down, but you're not equipped for it, you don't have the stomach for it." "You're wrong," Emma said, her voice cold as ice. "I don't need your approval. I'm not here to take over your empire or to inherit my father's mistakes. I'm here to protect myself and the people I care about. You can either help me or you can be in my way, but I'll make sure you regret it if you choose the latter." Victor's gaze hardened, and for the first time, Emma saw a flicker of something real in his eyes. It wasn't fear, but it was respect. And in this dangerous game they were playing, that was the only thing she needed to survive. "Very well," he said, his tone suddenly more serious. "If you want answers, you'll have to prove you're ready. This game isn't for the faint of heart. It's one of power, betrayal, and survival. If you think you can handle it, then we'll talk. But if not, then this is where our paths diverge." Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." Victor studied her for a moment, as though assessing whether her words held any weight. Then, slowly, he straightened up from the desk, his gaze unwavering as he moved toward a window overlooking the expansive grounds of his estate. The view was breathtaking: vast gardens, manicured lawns, and a glimpse of the private helicopter pad where his prized toys rested. Power. It radiated from every inch of the mansion, from the decor to the land it sat on. "You don't understand the depth of this world, Emma," Victor said, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. "Your father built more than just an empire. He created alliances, power structures that run deeper than you could ever imagine. And now, they'll want to know what you intend to do with it, what you intend to do with them." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had been so focused on the fact that her father's death had left her in the crosshairs, but now she understood. The empire wasn't just a business venture, it was a dangerous web of relationships, debts, and obligations. She had become the pivot point, the one who held the future of everything her father had built. But did she want it? She didn't know. What she did know was that she couldn't turn her back on everything, her father's legacy, whatever it may have been, and the people who relied on him. She couldn't just run away, as tempting as that option seemed. She wasn't that person anymore. She had to fight. Victor turned back to face her, his expression unreadable. "What's your play, Emma? What do you want out of this? You're not just here for answers. I can see it in your eyes. You want power, you want control, but you don't know what that will cost you." Emma's jaw tightened. "You've already told me how much it will cost. Your words speak of fear and manipulation." "But I won't be intimidated. I want to know the truth, Victor. The full truth about what happened to my father and what you plan to do with his legacy. No more games." Victor stepped toward her slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Fine," he said, his voice steady but edged with something darker. "The truth, as you call it, isn't as simple as you might think. It's more than just business deals or money laundering. Your father was involved in things you couldn't even begin to understand. And the moment you step into this world, you'll be forced to make choices. Hard choices. If you truly want the answers you seek, you'll have to be willing to get your hands dirty. Are you prepared for that?" The question hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She had spent so long pretending that she could take over her father's world without actually being a part of it. But now, she understood that the world he had left behind wasn't a place where she could just make demands and expect to walk away unscathed. It was a battlefield, one where you either played or you perished. Ethan's hand found her shoulder, grounding her, pulling her back from the abyss she could already feel herself tumbling toward. He didn't say anything, but his presence was enough. He was here with her every step of the way. Emma knew that without him, without his support, she might have turned tail and run. But now, with Ethan by her side, there was no turning back. Not anymore. Victor, noticing the subtle exchange between them, smirked. "You think you can just walk in here and make demands, but you don't even know the first thing about what's coming next. If you want my help, you'll have to prove yourself. Not just to me, but to everyone who has a stake in this empire. Your father's allies are exactly the forgiving type, Emma. And neither am I." Her mind raced, but Emma held her ground. She wasn't going to let Victor, or anyone, intimidate her anymore. "I'm ready," she said, the words firm and decisive. "Tell me what I need to do." Victor's eyes gleamed with something darker, a challenge. He stepped toward the door, opening it slightly before looking back at her. "Meet me at the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. Come alone and be ready to make a decision that will shape the rest of your life. There, you'll see if you truly understand the cost of what you're stepping into." Emma didn't hesitate. "When?" "Tomorrow night, midnight." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Emma and Ethan standing in stunned silence. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders like an anvil. Tomorrow night, the decision that would define her future. Ethan was the first to speak. "Emma, are you sure you want to do this? It's a dangerous game you're playing. Victor won't hesitate to use you if he thinks it benefits him." Emma turned to face him, meeting his concerned gaze. "I don't have a choice anymore, Ethan. I can't run away from this. If I'm going to survive this, I need to face it head-on. I need to know the truth, and I need to decide what I'm willing to do to protect myself and the people I care about." Ethan exhaled slowly, his hand gripping her arm gently. "I'll be there with you every step of the way, but promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," Emma said, though she wasn't sure if she believed her own words. The night air was crisp as Emma stepped out of her car and onto the dusty gravel road leading to the old warehouse. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow as the cold wind tugged at her jacket. The tall, abandoned building loomed ahead like a ghost, its windows dark and empty, yet brimming with unspoken secrets. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but she knew there was no escape now. Ethan had insisted on coming with her, but she had refused. This was her fight, her decision to make. She couldn't rely on anyone else to carry the burden for her, no matter how much she trusted him. He would be waiting in the car, just as she had instructed, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. But Emma knew the risks. If things went sideways, she might not make it out of this meeting alive. With one final glance behind her, she squared her shoulders and made her way to the large steel door of the warehouse. It creaked ominously as she pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty space. Her eyes quickly adjusted to the dim light inside, the air stale and thick with dust. It smelled of rust and decay, a far cry from the luxurious world Victor had shown her. As she ventured deeper into the warehouse, she heard the soft shuffle of footsteps ahead. A figure emerged from the shadows, his tall silhouette unmistakable. Victor. He stood leaning against a pillar, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes cold and calculating as they met hers. "You came alone," he said, his voice low but amused. "I told you I would," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. Victor stepped forward, his gaze never leaving her face. "Smart. Most people would have brought backup, but not you. You're not like them, are you?" Emma didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "What is this place? Why did you bring me here?" He chuckled softly. "This, Emma, is where all the deals are made, where things get settled. Your father knew it well. You'll need to learn about this world if you want to survive in it." Emma clenched her fists at her sides, a rush of anger flooding her veins. "You're playing a game, Victor, but I'm not here for your games. I want answers." Victor's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You want answers? Fine, but let's see if you're ready to handle the truth. You're the heir now, Emma, the one who's supposed to take over, but power isn't given freely. You have to earn it." He turned away from her, walking toward a small table in the corner of the room. The dim light caught the glint of something sharp on the surface, an ornate knife. He picked it up and inspected the blade, his fingers tracing its edge thoughtfully. Emma swallowed hard, her nerves prickling as she watched him. "What do you want from me?" Victor's gaze flicked back to her, his lips curling into a smirk. "I want you to prove that you deserve this, that you have what it takes to take your father's place." Emma's heart raced. This wasn't what she expected. She had come here seeking answers, hoping for clarity, but instead, she was being pushed into a game she wasn't sure she was ready to play. "I didn't ask for this," Emma said, her voice shaking just slightly despite her attempts to stay composed. "I didn't ask to be part of your world." Victor took a slow step toward her, his presence looming larger. "No, but you're in it now. You always have been. Your father might have kept you in the dark, but I won't. I'm giving you the chance to take the reins, to become more than just the daughter of a man you barely knew, but you have to be willing to fight for it." The weight of his words settled heavily on Emma's shoulders. Could she really do this? Could she truly step into her father's shoes, even if it meant becoming something she wasn't sure she wanted to be? "Prove it to me," Victor continued, his voice softer now, almost coaxing. "Prove you can handle this world, and I'll give you everything. The answers. The power." All of it? Emma's mind spun. This was a test that would define everything from here on out. She had to make a choice, accept Victor's challenge and step into the darkness, or walk away and lose everything. She met his gaze, her eyes hardening with determination. "I'm ready." Victor's expression flickered, as though assessing whether she was telling the truth. Then, without a word, he turned and motioned for her to follow him. They walked deeper into the warehouse, the silence between them stretching longer with each step. At the far end of the room, a large metal door stood ajar, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into the shadows. Victor's hand rested on the door, his gaze steady as he glanced at Emma. "Down there," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "That's where your real test begins." Emma felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't sure what awaited her down there, but she had made her decision. She had chosen this path. There was no turning back now. With a steady breath, she stepped forward, the creaking of the metal staircase beneath her feet a reminder that she was walking into the unknown. But she was no longer afraid. Emma was ready.